What my father did to me and my sister was terrible. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. It was when I found that flyer at the police station that I trembled from head to toe. The face printed there was the same one that watched us every night through the crack in the door. Wanted in 3 counties, the paper said, and in that moment, I understood why Mom always lowered her head and why we moved so often. Our own roof sheltered a criminal that everyone was looking for except us. Good morning, my dear viewers. How wonderful it is to chat with you today. My name is Martha Townsend. I'm 73 years old and I was born right here in Pine Creek, Kentucky, this warm and welcoming little spot in Appalachia that I carry in my heart. I never left my Kentucky. No, sir, from here straight to the grave. As my late grandmother used to say, my entire life was built on this land among the rolling hills and the Ohio River, which is a beautiful sight to see when it's flowing full. These days, even though I'm retired, I continue to be a nurse in heart and soul. I volunteer 3 times a week at the local clinic here in the neighborhood, primarily serving our children and the elderly who can't make it into town. You should see the joy when I arrive at the more remote homes with my bag of medicines and my blood pressure monitor. Their eyes light up, especially the children who know me as Miss Martha with the sweet medicines. I started this mission almost 20 years ago after I retired from the county hospital. I couldn't stay idle. My body needed to continue caring for people. You see, my loves, when you've been through so much pain in life, you seem to develop a special sensitivity for recognizing others' suffering. And nothing gives me more satisfaction than seeing a family reunited after a difficult recovery, seeing the relief in a mother's eyes when her little one's fever breaks, or teaching an elderly person how to take their high blood pressure medication correctly. I'm sitting here on my back porch where I have my medicinal herb garden. I have basil, lemon balm, mint, chamomile, aloe vera, echinacea, all planted with great care in old cans that I paint in cheerful colors. The cool morning breeze rustles the leaves and brings that scent that's a blessing from God. In the background, I hear the birds and the sound of dry leaves in the yard when the wind passes. It's a little corner of peace I built after so much storm. If you enjoy my story, please do me the favor of hitting that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next conversations. It's very important to me to know that someone is listening, because for much of my life, nobody listened. Not even when I silently screamed for help. And you, my dear viewers who are watching me now, tell me in the comments. From which part of America are you watching? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or late evening when the work is done? I imagine you in your homes, perhaps with a cup of coffee or a glass of water in hand, listening to this old nurse tell her life story. Let me know, okay? I love knowing where your kindness comes from. My children, I wasn't always this white-haired lady full of love to give. There was a time when I was just a frightened little girl, living in a house where danger lived with us. A house where the walls knew secrets that nobody could tell, and where we learned from an early age that some pains must be swallowed in silence. I'll tell you how it was to grow up like that, and how God in His infinite wisdom gave me the strength to survive and become who I am today. Ah, my childhood. How different it was from today. Back then in the late 1950s, Pine Creek was practically a village with few wooden houses, the little church, and the market that happened on Sundays. It was in this simple setting that I began to understand what it meant to be afraid inside my own home. Our house was on the edge of town, almost touching the woods. It was a simple house made of wood and brick, covered with ceramic tiles that crackled with the strong midday heat. We had a large yard in front where Mom planted okra and cucumbers, and a backyard with some speckled hens and a pen where we raised 2 piglets for the end-of-year holidays. On the side, a wooden rack served for washing dishes and clothes, and nearby there was a cement tank where we stored water for the dry periods. My father, Jerome Townsend, worked as a traveling salesman selling trinkets door-to-door through neighboring towns. A tall man with sun-weathered skin. He had small, restless eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. He wore an old straw hat and carried a leather case that he said he inherited from his grandfather. He would leave early and sometimes spend days away visiting distant towns like Riverside, Cedar Falls, or even Millbrook. When he returned, he brought money, but he also brought a different smell and a temper that varied like the weather during the rainy season. Sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, without warning. Mom Lenora was a petite woman with long hair, always tied in a low bun, who spoke little and walked hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight on her back. Her hands were rough from scrubbing clothes on the washboard and preparing food on the wood stove. She took care of the house in silence, like a shadow that moves without making noise. When Dad was around, she talked even less, only responding, yes, Jerome and no Jerome, with her eyes lowered as if afraid to breathe too loudly. We were 2 daughters, me, the oldest, and my little sister Della, who was 5 years younger than me.
Oh, my Della!
She was such a pretty girl, with curly hair that formed golden ringlets when the sun hit it. She had large, curious eyes and a smile that showed a little gap in front, where she lost a baby tooth too early. She was as clever as a fox and liked to ask questions about everything. Why is the sky blue, Martha? How does the chicken make eggs without the rooster? Martha, why can't we go to school every day? Martha's school. It was a luxury we couldn't always afford. It was almost 2 miles away, and to get there we had to cross the creek, which during the rainy season got too full to pass. The teacher, Miss Janey, was a patient lady who taught all the children in the town in one room. I loved when she read stories to us and showed pictures from old books that she kept like treasures. It was there that I learned to read, write, and do math, and discovered that there was a much larger world beyond those red dirt roads. Our routine was simple. We would wake up with the first rooster crow, still dark. Mom would light the fire to make coffee and cornmeal mush with milk when we had it. Then we would fetch water from the well, help sweep the yard, gather twigs for the stove, and tend to the chickens. If Dad wasn't at home, sometimes we could go to school. If he was, we usually stayed home helping your mother, as he would say, with that look that didn't allow discussion. On Sundays, we would go to church all dressed in our best clothes. It was the only day I saw Mom smile a little, greeting the neighbor ladies after the service. I remember the lavender scent she would put on our clothes and the sweet bread we would buy on the way back like a small weekly celebration. Later at home, we would prepare a more elaborate lunch with chicken or jerky when available. The best memories of my childhood were the moments when Dad traveled. The house seemed to breathe more easily. Mom talked more, would even sing softly while washing clothes, and we played freely in the yard. I loved playing with dolls with Della. Our dolls were made from corn husks with clothes made from scraps that Mom gave us. We also played house under the maple tree with improvised pots from old cans and food made from clay. I also had friends in the neighborhood. Celeste, daughter of Mr. Durwood, who lived 2 houses down, and Rita, granddaughter of Mrs. Nancy, the town midwife. When we got together, we would run to the creek to catch minnows with saves or play Ring Around the Rosie in one of their yards, singing Ring Around the Rosie or London Bridge is Falling Down. But there were shadows in this seemingly simple childhood. The first strange thing I noticed was when I was about 7 years old. Dad came back from a longer trip than usual, almost a month away. He arrived at night in an old car driven by a stranger, who didn't even get out to introduce himself. He brought different suitcases than the ones he took and seemed agitated. That same week, we moved to a house on the other side of town, far from the school and my friends. Mom said it was because the house was better, but it didn't seem better. It was smaller and more hidden at the end of a dead-end street. Another strange thing was how Dad would get nervous when someone knocked on the door. He always made Mom answer, but first he would peek through the crack in the window with an expression that mixed fear and anger, and woe to anyone who mentioned his full name near strangers. Once when I said Jerome Townsend to the lady at the store, where we bought groceries, I got a slap when I got home that left my lips swollen for days. Dad's trips became shorter and less frequent. He started staying more at home, always restless like a caged animal. It was during this time that the night started to get more frightening. He began to check if we were sleeping, coming into our room late at night. He said it was to make sure we were safe, but his heavy footsteps would wake me, and I would pretend to sleep, feeling a strange chill in my stomach when he approached. I remember perfectly the first time I realized something very wrong was happening in our house. It was a night of heavy storm, one of those with thunder that makes the whole house shake. I woke up startled by a different sound, not thunder, but crying. The muffled crying of Della. Her bed on the other side of the room was empty. I went out barefoot in the dark and saw a crack of light coming from Mom and Dad's room. Mom wasn't there. I later found out she had gone to help Mrs. Nancy with a difficult birth. I saw through the crack my little sister sitting on the big bed, with Dad saying softly, "It's our secret, princess. If you tell anyone, the bad men will come and take Mommy away." Her face was wet with tears, and there was a look in her eyes that I will never forget, a look that no child should ever have. That night, something broke inside me, like fine china that falls to the floor and can never be repaired again. I went back to bed trembling, not from cold, but from a feeling I didn't even know how to name yet. And it was that night that I promised myself I would protect my little sister no matter what. As the years passed, our house became increasingly heavy, as if the walls held secrets that no one could speak about, but everyone knew existed. I was already 13 years old, and Della 8 when things really got worse. Dad hardly ever left to sell his merchandise anymore. He said times were hard, that money was tight, but he always had coins to buy moonshine at Mr. David's store. Our house was now in the most remote part of Pine Creek, almost at the exit to Riverside. It was a corner house painted a faded blue with a high wall that Dad himself built, saying it was to protect the family from thieves. Today, I understand it was to hide what happened inside. The days when Dad drank were the worst. He would arrive staggering with eyes red as embers and a sour smell of moonshine mixed with sweat. On these days, Mom would send us straight to the room with a look that said everything. Stay quiet for the love of God. But the walls of the house were thin, and we heard everything. The screams, the senseless accusations, the sound of things breaking, and worst of all, Mom's contained sobs. This house is full of spies, Lenora. They're after me, but they won't catch me. I have eyes in the back of my head, woman. He would scream. Then came that horrible sound of a slap in the face and Mom begging quietly. Jerome, the girls will hear, please. I would hold Della tightly against my chest, covering her ears with my hands. She would tremble like a frightened little bird and whisper, Martha, why does Daddy get like this? Why doesn't he like us? How to explain to a child what I didn't understand myself? On one of those nights, when silence finally fell over the house, I heard dragging footsteps in the hallway. The door to our room opened with a creak that froze my spine. It was Dad. I pretended to sleep as I always did, but this time he didn't go to Della's bed as on other nights. He came to mine. I know you're awake, Martha, he said with a slurred voice. You're a big girl now, a young lady. You need to help more around the house. I felt his weight when he sat on the edge of my bed, and the smell of moonshine was so strong, it made me nauseous. His rough hand touched my face, then went down to my neck. So much like your mother when she was young. My heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. At that moment, like a divine blessing, we heard Mom's voice calling from the kitchen door. Jerome, there's a man wanting to speak to you. Dad jumped up, cursing under his breath. Who is it at this hour? He hurried out of the room, and I could finally breathe. The next day when I woke up, Dad wasn't home. Mom said he had left in a hurry, still in the early morning, taking a suitcase. He's going to be away for a while, she explained without looking me in the eyes. There was a cut in the corner of her mouth and a purple mark on her arm, but I didn't ask anything. I learned early that certain questions only brought more problems. Those weeks without Dad were like a breath of fresh air. Della started smiling again and singing her little songs while playing with the corn husk dolls. Mom was less tense, although she always looked at the road, as if expecting to see Dad appear at any moment. I even managed to return to school for a few days where the teacher commented on how behind I was in my studies, but that I had a good head for learning. It was on one of these trips to school that everything started to change. On the way, I passed by the only police station in town, a small building with a faded sign in front. What caught my attention was a newspaper nailed to the outer wall, a poster with photos of wanted men. I stopped to look out of curiosity, and that's when my world collapsed. There, among other black and white photos, was Dad's face. There was no doubt the same hard look, the square chin, the receding hairline. Below the photo was written, Jerome Allen Cooper, also known as Jerome Townsend or Jeremy Mills, wanted for crimes in Riverside, Millbrook, and Cedar Falls. I was paralyzed with weak legs. It wasn't just the fact of seeing my father there, but the different name, Jerome Allen Cooper. Who was this man living in our house? What had he done in these other towns? And why was he using our last name, Townsend End? Interested in the wanted men, little lady, the voice startled me. It was Officer Apollo the sheriff, a man with a gray mustache and tired eyes. It's good to keep an eye out. There are dangerous people out there. This one, he pointed to Dad's photo, is a scoundrel who takes advantage of families, pretends to be a traveling salesman, gains trust, and then, well, better you don't know. He's done harm to many people in other towns. We've been after him for a long time. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat close up. And what did he do? I managed to ask, my voice almost disappearing. The sheriff looked me up and down as if assessing if I was old enough to hear. Bad things with women and children, little lady. God forbid I go into details. But if you see someone who looks like him, run and let me know. Don't go near. You hear? I left without even thanking him, my head spinning and my stomach turning. I didn't go to school that day. I sat in the shade of a maple tree by the creek and cried until I had no more tears. Everything made sense now. The sudden moves, the fear Dad had of strangers, the prohibition of saying his full name, the night visits to our room. He wasn't who he claimed to be. And what he did to us, to Della, to Mom, wasn't what a father does. It was what a monster does. That afternoon when I returned home, I looked at everything with different eyes. Mom was in the kitchen kneading bread dough. Della was playing in the yard with pebbles, arranging them in rows. And I was carrying a secret too heavy for my young shoulders. "Mom?" I called softly. "I need to tell you something." She looked at me frightened, her hands covered in flour, paused in midair. "What happened, Martha? Did something happen at school?" "I saw Dad on a poster at the police station," I said at once, with another name, saying he's wanted. The color drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble, dropping flour on the floor. "You're making up stories, girl. Go wash your mouth with soap. It's true, Mom. He is Jerome Allen Cooper, not Townsend. And he did bad things in other towns. The sheriff said so." Mom came to me with quick steps and gave me a slap on the face that left my head ringing. "Never repeat that again." "Never," she hissed through her teeth. Then she knelt in front of me, holding my arms tightly. "If your father finds out you've been talking to people at the police station, he'll leave and take Della. Do you want that? Do you want him to take your little sister?" It was like a bucket of cold water. "No, Mom. Of course not." "Then forget what you saw. It's not our business what happened before. He is our provider, our support. Without him we starve or end up on the street." I saw something in her eyes that I had never noticed before. Not just fear, but complicity. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough, and she had chosen to stay silent. That night was the longest of my life. Lying in bed with Della sleeping beside me, I made a silent promise. I would find a way to protect us. Especially my little sister. If Mom wasn't going to do anything, I would. But how? I was just a 13-year-old girl with no money, no power, no one to help. Over the next few days I started to observe everything more carefully. I noticed where Dad kept his money in a cookie tin. Hidden under a loose floorboard in the bedroom, I saw when he came home drunk and left the house key hanging on a nail behind the door. And most importantly, I noticed how Della became increasingly quiet and frightened when he was around. One night, while washing dishes after dinner, I heard a different noise coming from the bedroom. Dad had returned a few days ago and was more irritable than ever. "Where did you go while I was away, Martha?" He asked me several times with those eyes that seemed to penetrate my soul. "Did you talk to people in town? Did you go to the police station?" I swore that I didn't, that I only helped Mom and went to school when possible, but he didn't seem to believe it. That night, the sound was of crying. Della's muffled crying. Without thinking twice, I left the dishes in the basin and ran to the bedroom. The door was ajar, and through the crack I saw the scene that still torments me on nights of insomnia. Dad, sitting on Della's bed, with his hand covering her mouth to muffle the crying, while his other hand, "Dad," I shouted, pushing the door with all my might. "The lady at the store is calling." She said it's urgent. He turned to me with bloodshot eyes. For a moment I thought he was going to hit me right there, but then he stood up, adjusting his clothes. "What woman? What store? At this hour?" "Mrs. Jackie." I made up the first name that came to mind. "She said a man came asking about you. Looked like police." I never saw Dad move so fast. He left the room almost running, grabbed his hat in the living room, and disappeared through the front door. I ran to Della and hugged her tight. She sobbed against my chest. "He won't touch you again," I promised, rocking her like a baby. "I won't let him. Never again." But how to keep that promise? How to protect my little sister when danger lived under the same roof and had the power of a father, even if he was a fake father with a fake name and a life built on lies? It was that night, with Della finally asleep in my arms, that I began to plan our escape. I didn't know where we would go or how we would survive. But anywhere would be better than this house that had become a prison. And I, at 13 years old, with responsibility weighing on my slender shoulders, had to find a way out before it was too late. The days that followed were like walking on broken glass. Dad returned the following dawn, more sober and suspicious than ever. "What's this story about a woman from the store looking for me?" he asked at breakfast, looking straight at me. I went there and nobody knew anything. I swallowed hard but kept my voice firm. I just repeated what I was told. Dad, the girl who warned me must have been mistaken. His eyes narrowed like a snake about to strike. "Are you sure you're not making up stories, Martha? You know I don't like lies." "I'm sure, Dad," I replied, feeling my heart almost jumping out of my mouth. He didn't say anything else, but in the days that followed, he seemed to watch me constantly. He wouldn't let me go to school, or to the store, or to the creek to fetch water. "You stay right here helping your mother," he ordered, and at night, he would lock the front door and put the key under his pillow. I began to realize we were trapped, not just by fear, but literally locked in that house. Mom continued her ritual of silence and submission, lowering her eyes when Dad spoke loudly, agreeing with everything. When I tried to talk to her about what I had seen at the police station, she simply said, "I already told you to forget that girl. Do you want to destroy our family?" Family. What a strange word to describe that arrangement of fear and secrets. The only person who really mattered to me there was Della. My little sister was getting thinner and quieter each day. She no longer sang while playing, didn't smile, didn't ask curious questions. Sometimes I caught her staring at nothing with that empty look that no child should have. One night, as I combed her hair before bed, she whispered something so softly I almost didn't hear. "I wish we could disappear, Martha, go somewhere where no one could find us." Those words broke me inside. "We will disappear, Della," I promised, hugging her tightly. "I just need to find a way. Do you trust me?" She nodded, her big sad eyes fixed on mine. "I trust you more than anyone in the world." That trust was both a weight and a blessing at the same time. I had to find a way out and fast. But how? Where would we go? We had no close relatives, at least none that we knew of. Mom said her parents had died a long time ago and never talked about Dad's family. Now I understood why. Probably that story was also a lie. Maybe even our last name was an invention. The opportunity came in the most unexpected way. It was a Tuesday market day in Pine Creek. Dad had to go into town to sell some merchandise he had acquired, I don't know how, and buy supplies. For the first time in weeks, he decided to take Della with him. "The girl needs to walk around, get some sun. She's too pale," he said with that false concern that made me nauseous. The idea of Della alone with him in town terrified me. "Can I go too, Dad?" "I'll help carry things," I asked, trying to sound casual. "No, you stay and help your mother with the laundry." "There's a bunch waiting," he replied dryly. When they left, I was on the verge of despair. Mom was in the backyard hanging sheets on the line. I went to her determined to try one more time. "Mom, you know what he does to Della, don't you?" She continued hanging clothes as if she hadn't heard me, but I saw her hands tremble. "Mom, for God's sake, he's a criminal. It's written right there at the police station. And what he does to us, to Della, it isn't right, you know that." She turned to me suddenly, and for the first time, I saw something beyond fear in her eyes. I saw anger. "And what do you want me to do, Martha? Where do we go without money, with nothing? Do you think anyone will believe us? Do you think anyone will want to help? We can go to Grandma's house in Louisville," I suggested, mentioning her mother, whom we had never visited, but whom Mom sometimes talked about. She let out a bitter laugh. "What, Grandma girl? My mother died years ago. That story is just so you would have some hope." It was like a slap in the face, another lie, another closed door. "Then we report him. Tell everything to the sheriff," I insisted. "And who will believe us? A woman with no education and 2 girls against a man who is respected in town. You are very naive, Martha. The world doesn't work like that." "But the sheriff already knows he's wanted. There's a poster there, and do you think he'll care about what happens inside our house? Things like this happen everywhere, girl. Nobody cares." I stood there tasting the bitterness of powerlessness. Mom went back to hanging clothes as if that conversation had never existed. I realized then that I couldn't count on her. If I wanted to save Della and myself, I would have to act alone. That afternoon, I searched the house for anything that could help us. I found the cookie tin where Dad kept money and took some bills, not all, so he wouldn't notice immediately. Then I looked for documents, something that would prove who we were. In an old trunk at the back of the room, I found our birth certificates. I took mine and Della's. I also found an old photograph. Mom, younger, smiling next to an older woman who looked like her. On the back was written Lenora and Mrs. Annette 1943. Was this my grandmother whom Mom said was dead? Why would she lie about this? I kept everything in a small cloth bundle along with some changes of clothes for me and Della, and hid it under the bed. I still didn't know when or how we would escape, but at least we would be prepared when the time came. Dad and Della returned late in the afternoon. He seemed satisfied, which was always a bad sign. Della, on the other hand, was quieter than ever, looking at the ground as she walked. When we finally were alone in the room, I asked what had happened. "He took me to a strange place after the market," she whispered. "A house at the end of Maple Street. There was a man there who kept looking at me. Dad said he was a friend who wanted to meet his daughter, but he looked at me in a weird way, Martha. The same way Dad looks." My blood froze in my veins. "Did he touch you?" "This man," She shook her head. No, he just kept looking at me and talking to Dad. I didn't understand well, but I heard him say something about how much and when. Then Dad said we would go back there next week. At that moment I knew we had no more time. Whatever Dad was planning, it would happen next week. The idea was so horrible that I couldn't even formulate it in thoughts. That night I could barely sleep. I heard Dad and Mom arguing in the kitchen, their voices muffled by the thin walls. It's a good amount, woman. Solves our problems, he said, but it's Della, our daughter. Mom's voice trembled. And since when did that matter to you? You stay quiet when I go to their room, don't you? At least this way she'll be good for something. The sound of a slap followed by Mom's contained crying. Then silence, a silence more terrifying than any scream. The next morning Dad announced that he needed to travel to Millbrook. Important business, he explained. I'll be back in 3 days. And you three. He looked at all of us with those hard eyes. Don't leave the house. Understand, for nothing in this world. When he left, Mom's face was swollen with a cut on her lip. She tried to act normally, preparing coffee, but her hands were shaking so much that she spilled water all over the kitchen floor. Mom? I called softly when Della went to the backyard. What is he going to do with Della? What's this story about going back to that house next week? She looked at me with empty eyes, as if her soul had been sucked out. He's going to sell her Martha to a man from Millbrook who likes young girls. It was as if the world had collapsed. Even knowing Dad's evil ways, I never imagined he would go this far. And you're going to let him? I asked, my voice choked with anger and desperation. She didn't answer. She just continued sweeping the floor, silent tears falling down her bruised face. At that moment, I made my decision. We wouldn't wait any longer. It was now or never. I'm going to take Della away from here, I announced. Today, to my surprise, Mom didn't try to stop me. She just looked at me for a long time, as if seeing me for real for the first time. Then she went to the bedroom and came back with a small package. Take it. It's the money I've saved all these years, hidden from him. It was a small amount, but larger than what I had managed to take. Take Della to Louisville. Look for the house on Maple Avenue, number 18. Ask for Mrs. Annette Cooper. Tell her you're her granddaughter. Are you coming with us? I asked, a last thread of hope. She slowly shook her head. I can't. He would find me. And you too. Someone needs to stay to distract him, to give you time to go far away. I looked at that fragile woman, broken by years of fear and violence, and for the first time felt something beyond anger for her silent complicity. I felt pity and gratitude. You'll never see us again, I said, the reality of this farewell finally hitting me. A ghost of a smile passed her bruised lips. It's better this way. Go and don't look back. Build a life I couldn't give you. That afternoon, while Mom distracted the neighbors by chatting at the gate, I left with Della through the back of the house, our few possessions in a cloth bundle. I told her we were going on an adventure, that we would meet our grandmother in Louisville. Her eyes, for the first time in a long time, shone with something that looked like hope. The problem was that we had never traveled alone before. Me, a 13-year-old girl, and Della, only 8, trying to get to Louisville, a city we only knew by name. With no documents except our birth certificates, no adult to accompany us, with little money in our pockets, and the constant fear that Dad would return earlier than expected and come after us. We got a ride in a cargo truck that was going to Smithville. The driver, Mr. Gerald, was an old man with white hair, who believed me when I said we were going to meet our sick aunt. From Smithville, we would have to find another transport to Pikeville and from there to Louisville. Sitting in the back of the truck among sacks of flour and beans holding tight to each other's hands, while the dust from the road rose around our faces, I looked to the horizon with a mix of terror and hope. We were fleeing from the only home we knew, leaving behind the mother who, despite everything, loved us in the twisted way she could, and we were going in search of a grandmother we didn't even know existed for real in a big unknown city. But when I looked at Della, at that little face that was beginning to relax as we moved away from Pine Creek, I knew we were doing the only possible thing, because sometimes running away isn't cowardice. It's the only act of courage within our reach. What we didn't know was that our journey would be much more difficult and dangerous than we could imagine. And that before we found any kind of peace, we would have to face the hell that Dad would prepare for us when he discovered our escape. Night fell quickly as Mr. Gerald's truck advanced down the dirt road. The constant jostling lulled Della, who fell asleep with her head on my lap, but I couldn't close my eyes. Every time the truck slowed down, my heart raced, fearing it was Dad catching up to us. Every distant headlight seemed like a threat. Every strange noise made me hold Della tighter against me. We arrived in Smithville quite late. Mr. Gerald dropped us off in the central square near the church. There's a boarding house over there on the corner run by the Collins sisters. He indicated. Say Gerald sent you, they won't deny you shelter. I thanked him with tears in my eyes. That small kindness, the first of many we would find along the way, seemed like a miracle after years living in the hell that Dad had created for us. The boarding house was an old two-story building painted faded yellow with a modest sign at the entrance. Two identical elderly ladies with gray hair tied in buns received us with suspicious expressions. 2 little girls alone at this hour? Asked one of them, looking over her glasses. Mr. Gerald sent us. I explained, my voice trembling. We're going to meet our grandmother in Louisville. She's sick and needs us. The sisters exchanged glances. I realized they didn't completely believe the story, but something in our tired and frightened faces must have touched their hearts. Come in, come in. I'll prepare a hot broth for you, said the other sister, opening the door wider. And tomorrow morning, we'll think about what to do. No girl is going to leave here for the road without a sure direction. That night, in a simple but clean room with 2 twin beds covered with crocheted quilts, I allowed myself to relax a little. Della fell asleep quickly after having the broth and eating a piece of cornbread that the sisters offered. Looking at her sleeping, her little face finally at peace, I felt a mixture of love and fear that almost suffocated me. What if we couldn't make it to Louisville? What if the supposed grandma didn't exist or didn't want us? And worse, what if Dad found us? I took the photo I had stolen from home, Mom young, next to the supposed Mrs. Annette, and kept looking at those smiling faces from a time when there might have been hope. Was this really our grandmother? Why would Mom lie about her being dead? So many questions and no one to answer them. The next day, the Collins sisters, whom I discovered were called Dolly and Daisy, sat us in the kitchen for a frank conversation. You're not going to visit any sick grandmother, are you? Asked Mrs. Dolly directly while serving milk coffee for us. I lowered my eyes, not knowing what to answer. I didn't want to lie anymore, but I was afraid of telling the truth and being sent back home. You're running away from someone, aren't you? Continued Mrs. Daisy with a softer voice. From your father, perhaps. I raised my head suddenly. How did she know? It's not the first time we've seen girls like this, explained Mrs. Dolly, sighing. Unfortunately, it won't be the last. This world has a lot of bad men, my daughter, and some of the worst are the ones who should protect their own family. I felt tears running down my face. I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. Did he hurt you? Asked Mrs. Daisy in a low tone so as not to wake Della, who was playing with a cat in the yard. Especially her. I finally answered, my voice almost disappearing, and he was going to sell her to a man in Millbrook. That's why we ran away. We're trying to get to our grandmother's house in Louisville, but I don't know if she really exists, or if she'll take us in. The sisters exchanged heavy looks as if communicating without words, years of experience with similar stories. There's a market truck leaving tomorrow morning for Pikeville, said Mrs. Dolly after a moment. The driver is our nephew Anthony. I'll talk to him about taking you from Pikeville. It's easier to get transportation to Louisville. There are even buses. We don't have much money, I confessed, embarrassed. Don't worry about that now, Mrs. Daisy smiled gently. The important thing is for you to arrive safely. That day at the Collins sisters' boarding house was like a breath before the storm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel constant fear. Della even smiled a few times, playing with the striped cat that the ladies called Patchy. We washed our few clothes, ate well, and I even helped in the kitchen peeling potatoes for lunch. But the peace didn't last long. In the late afternoon, when we were sitting on the porch watching the movement in the little square, a black, dusty car stopped in front of the church. The man who got out made my blood freeze. It wasn't Dad, but I recognized him. It was Timothy, one of the friends who sometimes showed up at our house to drink moonshine with Dad, the same one who looked at me and Della in a way that gave me the chills. I pulled Della inside the house with a sudden movement. What's wrong, Martha? She asked, frightened. Nothing. It's just getting cold, I lied. Let's help Mrs. Dolly with dinner. From the kitchen window, I saw Timothy talking to some men in the square, showing something that looked like a paper. My heart was beating so hard, I thought the sisters could hear it. What's wrong, girl? Looks like you've seen a ghost, asked Mrs. Daisy, noticing my paleness. There's a man out there, I whispered. A friend of my father's. I think he's looking for us. The sisters exchanged alarmed glances. Mrs. Dolly went to the window and discreetly peeked out. The one with the brown hat talking to the taffy seller. I nodded. Go to the little back room, she ordered calmly. Stay there and don't make a sound. Daisy, take them while I keep an eye out here. Mrs. Daisy led us through a narrow corridor to a small room that seemed to be used as storage with piles of sheets, towels, and other household items. Stay here and don't come out for anything, she instructed. If you hear men's voices, hide under those quilts piled in the corner. The following hours were the longest of my life, sitting on the floor of that stuffy little room, holding each other. We heard knocks on the front door of the boarding house. Male voices, the firm voice of Mrs. Dolly answering something we couldn't distinguish. Then, heavy footsteps through the house, doors being opened and closed. He's going to find us, Della whimpered against my chest. He's going to take us back. No, he won't, I promised, despite the terror consuming me. We're never going back. The footsteps approached the corridor that led to our hiding place. Quickly, I pulled Della under the piled quilts as Mrs. Daisy had instructed. I held my breath, feeling my heart almost jumping out of my mouth. The door to the little room opened with a creak. Through the gap between the quilts, I saw worn leather boots stopping very close to us. Timothy's voice sounded clear. And this room here? What is it? Bedding storage, as you can see, answered Mrs. Daisy in a neutral tone. If you want to go through everything, feel free, but you'll have to fold it all back afterward, you hear. A moment of silence that seemed eternal, then an irritated sigh. All right, I've looked enough, but if those two little pests show up here, let me know. Their father is desperate. Girls that age shouldn't be wandering around alone. They could get into serious trouble. Certainly, agreed Mrs. Daisy. If I see any girls like that, I'll notify the authorities. It's the right thing to do, don't you think? Another tense silence. Then the boots moved away and the door was closed. Only when we heard the car start and drive away did Mrs. Dolly come to get us. You can come out now, my children. He's gone, but he'll come back. These types always come back. Did he show any picture of us? I asked, trembling. He showed it. And also a letter saying you are disturbed that you ran away from home because you have problems in your heads. He said your father is offering a reward to whoever finds you. I felt a weight in my stomach. Dad was using his money and influence to hunt us down, and he was spreading lies so that no one would help us. We have to leave here, I decided now, not tomorrow. He'll come back and maybe bring more people. I agree, said Mrs. Dolly. I'm going to call my nephew right now. He can take you tonight, even if it's not the original plan. In less than an hour, we were saying goodbye to the Collins sisters. They gave us a bundle with food, a bottle of water, and something that left me speechless, an envelope with money. We can't accept it, I said, trying to give it back. You can and you will, insisted Mrs. Daisy. It's our tithe for this month. Instead of giving it to the church, we're giving it to those who really need it. God will understand. I hugged the two ladies with tears in my eyes, and Della did the same. How can we thank you? I asked. Find a safe place, answered Mrs. Dolly. And when you grow up, help other girls who need it. That's how good multiplies in this world. Anoni's truck was smaller and older than Mr. Gerald's. The young man, a quiet man of about 30, helped us climb into the back where there were some sacks of flour and corn. You can hide back there if you see any suspicious car, he instructed. The trip to Pikeville is long, and the road isn't the best. We left in the dead of night, leaving Smithville behind. The road was indeed bad, bumpy and dusty, shaking the truck as if we were in a stormy sea. I held Della tightly, trying to protect her from the strongest jolts. At some point in the early morning, when the moon was already high in the sky, I heard the sound of an engine behind us. Stretching my neck, I saw two headlights approaching quickly. Anthony, I shouted, knocking on the cabin. There's a car coming. He looked in the rearview mirror and accelerated. The car also increased its speed. Hide, he shouted. I pulled Della behind the flour sacks, covering us as best I could. The car got so close that we could hear the engine roaring, almost glued to the back of the truck. It's him, Della whimpered. It's Dad. It wasn't possible to see from where we were hidden, but Della's fear infected me as well. Had Dad returned earlier than expected? Had Timothy warned him? The truck made a sharp turn, throwing us against the side of the bed. I heard a cry from Della, not of fright, but of pain. When I looked, I saw that her arm had hit a protruding nail, opening a cut that was bleeding profusely. My arm, Martha, she cried. I tore a piece of my skirt to make an improvised tourniquet. But the blood continued to flow. We needed to stop to get help. But how with that car chasing us? At that moment, as if in answer to an unspoken prayer, the truck made another turn. And then the miracle. The car that was chasing us kept going straight on the main road. It wasn't for us. It was just another traveler in a hurry taking the highway that led to Osley. I desperately knocked on the cabin. Anthony, my sister got hurt. She's bleeding a lot. He stopped the truck on the shoulder and came to check. When he saw Della's wound, his usually impassive face contorted with concern. "We need a doctor. There's a small town about 20 minutes from here, Deer Creek. I'll take you straight to the clinic there." During that trip to Deer Creek, I held Della in my arms, praying like I had never prayed before. She was pale and weak, the blood soaking the cloth I had tied. "Don't leave me, Della," I whispered in her ear. "I promise we'll make it. We'll find Grandma, we'll have a new life. Just don't leave me." The town was really small, little more than a main street with some houses, a church, and thank God, a small clinic that operated 24 hours for emergencies. The nurse on duty, Mr. Julian, a middle-aged man with deep, dark circles, didn't ask many questions. He cleaned, stitched, and bandaged Della's arm with quick and efficient movements. "She lost quite a bit of blood, but she'll be fine," he reassured us. "But she needs to rest. Where are you coming from in such a hurry in the middle of the night?" Anthony intervened before I could invent another story. "They're my nieces. I'm taking them to their grandmother in Louisville, their mother." "Well, she's not in a condition to take care of them right now." The nurse nodded with a look that said he understood more than had been said. "You can stay here until morning. There's a small room in the back with a bed where the doctor rests when he's on duty. Today he's not coming. You can use it." It was in that simple room with white-tiled walls and a smell of alcohol that I finally broke down. Sitting next to the bed where Della slept, sedated by the pain medicine, I allowed the tears I had held for so long to finally come. I cried for Mom, who had stayed behind. I cried for Della, injured and frightened. I cried for myself, a 13-year-old girl trying to be an adult, trying to save the only person who really mattered to me. That night I had a dream. Or maybe it was a nightmare. I saw Dad finding the empty house, his face contorting with fury. I saw him beating Mom, demanding to know where we had gone. I saw Timothy and other men scattered across the roads of Kentucky, looking for two frightened girls. And at the end of the dream, I saw a face I didn't know. An elderly lady with gray hair and kind eyes, just like Mom's when she smiled, extending her hands to us. Would it be Mrs. Annette, our grandmother? Was she real or just a wish from my desperate heart for safety? I woke up at dawn with Della's hand in mine. She was awake, looking at me with those big eyes that had seen things no child should see. "I had a dream about Grandma Martha," she said softly. "She was waiting for us in a blue house with flowers in the window." "I dreamed of her too," I replied, surprised. "Is it a sign?" Della solemnly nodded. "Yes, she exists, Martha, and we'll find her." That simple and unwavering faith coming from a child who had been through so much gave me strength to continue. Anthony appeared shortly after bringing bread and coffee he had bought at the only bakery in the village. "How's the little one?" he asked. "Better," I answered. "Thank you for everything you're doing for us." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the thanks. "My aunts raised me to help those in need. Besides," he hesitated, "I also had a sister who went through something similar. Only no one helped her in time." That revelation said so simply made me see that we weren't alone in our pain. How many other girls had similar stories? How many didn't have the chance to escape to find good people along the way? "We'll continue to Pikeville as soon as your sister can travel," Anthony continued. "From there, I'll help you get the bus to Louisville. There's one that leaves at noon. If you don't have problems on the way, you'll get there before nightfall." Della, who had been quiet until then, spoke with a determination that surprised me. "We'll make it, Martha. We have to make it. I won't let Dad sell me to that man. I'd rather die." Those words coming from the mouth of an 8-year-old child were the exact point where I realized there was no turning back. What Dad had done to us, what he planned to do, was so monstrous that it had stolen my little sister's childhood, turning her into a small adult willing to die for her own freedom. "It won't happen," I promised, holding her hands in mine. "Even if I have to face the whole world, no one is going to hurt you again, Della, never again." It was a huge promise for a 13-year-old girl. But in that clinic room of a lost village in the interior of Kentucky, with the rising sun casting its first rays through the simple window, I swore to myself that I would keep this promise no matter what. What I didn't know is that I would be tested much sooner than I imagined, because on the horizon, like an approaching storm, Dad was already on our trail, and he wouldn't easily give up what he considered his property. We managed to reach Pikeville in the afternoon of that same day. Della was weak but determined to continue. The bandage on her arm would need to be changed soon, but at least the bleeding had stopped. Anthony took us directly to the bus station, a simple building with a ticket window and some wooden benches where passengers waited. "There's a bus to Louisville leaving in an hour," he informed after checking. "I'll buy the tickets for you. You don't need to spend your money, I protested. Your aunts have already helped us so much. It's their money, actually. He smiled for the first time since we had met him. They gave it to me to make sure you arrived safely, and I promised I would fulfill that. While we waited, Anthony bought us bread with cheese and juice from a small shop nearby. We ate in silence, the three of us sitting on a bench away from the others, where we could observe who arrived without being easily seen. When you get to Louisville, he finally said, be careful. It's a big city, very different from what you know. Take a taxi straight to your grandmother's address. Don't talk to strangers. Don't say where you came from or why you're alone. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. Louisville was just a name to me. I had never been to a big city, never ridden in a taxi, never navigated an unknown place alone. What if our grandmother isn't there? Asked Della, voicing the fear I was trying to ignore. Anthony looked at us for a long time, as if evaluating what to say. Then you look for the nearest church. Ask to speak to the priest or a nun. Say you need help, but only do this if you don't find your grandmother. Understand? First, try the address you have. When the bus finally arrived, an old and dusty vehicle, but to us as imposing as a moving palace, Anthony accompanied us to the door. He handed me a package wrapped in brown paper. There's food for the journey, a little more money that my aunt sent, and the phone number of their boarding house. If you need to call, someone will always answer. I briefly hugged him, swallowing back tears. Thank you. God will reward you for this. He already has, he replied simply. Good luck, little ones. The bus departed, raising dust. Through the window I saw Anthony staying behind, a solitary figure waving until the road made a curve, and he disappeared from view. The journey to Louisville was long and tiring. The bus stopped in small towns along the way, people getting on and off, chickens cackling in baskets, children crying. Della slept most of the time, her head resting on my shoulder. I, however, couldn't close my eyes. Every time the bus stopped, every time someone new got on, my heart raced, fearing to see the face of Dad or Timothy. When we finally arrived in Louisville, it was already getting dark. The bus terminal was chaos of people, noise and movement. I held Della's hand firmly, our small bundle of belongings pressed against my chest. I had never seen so many people together, so many cars, so many lights. Where do we go now? Della asked, eyes wide at this new world. I took a deep breath, trying to appear more confident than I felt. We're going to find a taxi, like Anthony said, to take us to Grandma's house. Outside the bus station, I managed to find a taxi, my first taxi in life. The driver, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Ben, looked at us suspiciously. Two little girls alone, where are your parents? We're going to our grandmother's house, I explained, showing the address written on a piece of paper. Maple Avenue, number 18. Our parents? They couldn't come, Mr. Ben continued, looking at me with that expression adults have when they know something isn't right. But he ended up shrugging. Get in then. But this street is in an old neighborhood. I don't know if the number still exists. During the journey through the streets of Louisville, I was amazed by the size of the city, the lights, the buildings. For someone who only knew Pine Creek and some small villages, Louisville seemed like another world. Della was equally fascinated, her nose glued to the car window. Look at all the lights, Martha. It looks like Christmas. Finally, after a few turns through narrow streets of an older neighborhood, Mr. Ben stopped the car. Here it is. Maple Avenue number 18 should be that one over there. My heart almost stopped when I saw the house. It was an old construction painted blue with flower pots in the window, exactly like in the dream that Della had described. I'll wait until you get inside, said Mr. Ben, just to make sure there's someone home. With trembling legs, I held Della's hand and walked to the wrought iron gate. I rang the bell once, twice. Nothing happened. The house seemed silent, with just a faint light visible through the living room curtains. There's no one there, Della murmured, her voice breaking with disappointment. Let's try one more time, I insisted, ringing the bell again. It was then that we heard slow footsteps approaching. The front door opened and a lady appeared. Even in the dim light, I immediately recognized her from the photograph. It was her, Mrs. Annette, our grandmother, older, her hair completely white now, but with the same kind eyes. Who's there? She called, her voice trembling with age. Mrs. Annette, I asked, moving closer. We're Martha and Della, Lenora's daughters. There was a moment of absolute silence. Then the lady brought her hands to her face, a sob escaping her lips. Oh my God in heaven, Lenora's girls, my granddaughters. She opened the gate with trembling hands, and before we could say anything else, hugged us. It was a fragile hug from thin arms and hands calloused by time, but it was the safest and most welcoming hug we had ever felt. Come in, she insisted, tears flowing freely down her wrinkled face. How did you get here? Where is Lenora? Did she come with you? I made a sign to Mr. Ben, who was waiting in the taxi. He nodded and departed, apparently satisfied to see us received. Inside Mrs. Annette's house, time seemed to have stopped. Old furniture, yellowed photographs on the walls, a smell of herbs and coffee. She took us to the living room, made us sit on the sofa covered with a crocheted quilt, and just stood looking at us, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. You look just like Lenora when she was little, she finally said. Especially you, Martha. The same eyes, and you, little one, she caressed Della's face, have her smile. Are you really our grandmother? Della asked, her voice full of hope. Yes, my dear, your mother's mother. It's been more than 15 years since I've seen Lenora. Since she left with that man, her voice failed. But tell me, how did you get here? How did you find me? It was then that I had to tell everything. I didn't want to. I didn't plan to reveal our story so soon, but her questions demanded answers. And something in that lady's eyes told me we could trust her. I told about Dad, about what he did to us, about discovering he was wanted in several cities, about his plan to sell Della. I told about our escape, about the good people we had met along the way, about the address Mom had given us. While I spoke, Mrs. Annette cried silently, her hand squeezing an old handkerchief. Jerome Allen Cooper, she murmured when I finished. I knew it. I always knew he was a bad man. I tried to prevent Lenora from going with him, but she was enchanted. Said he would give her a better life. What a shame, my daughter not protecting her own daughters. She helped us escape. I defended Mom. She gave the money she had saved. Gave us your address. She said she would stay to distract him to give us time. Mrs. Annette nodded slowly. So something good remained in her then. Thank God. That night, after a warm bath, the first in days, and a decent meal, we slept in a real bed with clean sheets that smelled of lavender. Della fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the journey and still weak from the injury. I, however, stayed awake for a while, looking at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. Were we safe? Really safe? Would Dad find us here? And what would happen to Mom when he discovered where we had gone? The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and cornbread. For a moment, I was disoriented, not recognizing where I was. Then I remembered we were at Grandma's house in Louisville, far from Dad. In the kitchen, I found Mrs. Annette preparing breakfast. Della was already sitting at the table, eating bread and drinking milk. She looked better with a little more color in her cheeks. Good morning, my dear. Grandma smiled. Did you sleep well? Yes, Mom, I replied, still not entirely comfortable calling her Grandma, although Della was already doing so naturally. Thank you for everything. No need to thank me. You're my granddaughters. You should have come here a long time ago. She hesitated as if choosing her words. Martha, after breakfast, we need to talk about what we're going to do. The conversation happened in the living room, while Della played in the small backyard with a calico cat that Grandma called Romeo. Mrs. Annette explained that she had been a widow for many years, lived on her husband's pension, who had been a postal worker. The house was her own, small but comfortable, and she had been alone since her only daughter, Lenora, had left with Jerome. I never accepted that man, she confessed. There was something in his eyes, something cold, calculating. When Lenora said she was leaving with him, that they were getting married, I tried to stop her. We argued badly. She accused me of wanting to prevent her happiness. She left slamming the door, swearing she would never return. For years I tried to find her. I sent letters to all the places I suspected they might be. I never got a response. She told us you had died, I confessed, feeling guilty for revealing another of Mom's lies. Mrs. Annette closed her eyes as if it were physical pain. I understand it was easier for her to say that than to admit she had cut ties with me. Or maybe he forced her to say that. I think it was him. I agreed. He didn't like us talking to anyone. We lived practically isolated. She nodded thoughtful. Martha, you can stay here with me. This house is yours too. But she hesitated. Jerome will come looking. If he knows this address, it's just a matter of time until he appears. The fear returned, cold and familiar. What will we do then? We'll go to the police, she decided. Today we'll tell everything. Show Della's wound. Explain about the poster you saw. About his plans to sell the child. Her voice failed on the last part. The law must protect you. And if he shows up here, he'll have a surprise. I'm not a defenseless old woman. That afternoon, we did exactly that. Grandma took us to the Central Police Station in Louisville, a large and intimidating building. There we talked to a detective named Johnson, a man with a serious face but kind eyes who listened to our story attentively. He asked us to repeat some details, took notes, called a female officer to speak to Della separately. "We're going to check on this Jerome Allen Cooper in our records," he assured. "If he's really wanted in other cities, we'll find him and we'll provide protection for you. He might hurt our mother when he discovers where we came." I alerted the fear for Mom growing now that we were relatively safe. "We'll contact the police in Pine Creek," the detective promised, "ask them to check on her situation. Don't worry, girl. You did the right thing coming to us." In the days that followed, we lived in a strange mixture of fear and hope. Grandma wouldn't let us go out alone, not even to the gate. We changed Della's bandage at a nearby clinic, where a kind doctor named Dr. Helen not only took care of the wound but also made a detailed report to attach to our complaint to the police. "Your little sister will be fine," she assured me. "But there will be a scar. Some wounds never completely disappear. They just become part of who we are." A week after our arrival, Detective Johnson came personally to Grandma's house. He sat with us in the living room and gave us the news that would change everything. We confirmed that Jerome Allen Cooper is wanted for crimes in 3 different cities in Kentucky, he explained. Serious crimes against women and children. He has used at least 4 different names in recent years, and he hesitated, looking at Grandma as if asking permission to continue. "You can speak, Detective," she encouraged. "They need to know the whole truth." We contacted the police in Pine Creek. When they went to check on your mother's situation, they found no one in the house. The neighbors said there was a bad fight, that they heard screams and then silence. Jerome was seen leaving town the next day alone. My heart seemed to freeze in my chest. "And Mom, where is Mom?" The detective lowered his eyes. "We still don't know, Martha. We're looking, but you need to be prepared. It may not be good news when we find her." The tears came without warning. An uncontrollable river. Della, who was playing in the bedroom, came running when she heard me crying. "What happened, Martha? What happened?" I couldn't answer. It was Grandma who hugged her, who explained in simple words that Mom was missing, that the police were looking for her. That night, after Della finally fell asleep, I cried until I had no more tears. Grandma stayed by my side, stroking my hair, murmuring words of comfort. "It's not your fault, my dear. You saved your sister. You did what you could. But we abandoned Mom," I sobbed. "She stayed to protect us, and now Lenora made a choice, Martha. The choice of a mother who in the end wanted to protect her daughters. Don't take that away from her. It was the last act of love she could offer." 2 weeks later, we received the news we feared. Mom's body had been found buried in the backyard of our old house. Jerome had disappeared, and now he was wanted not only for his old crimes, but also for murder. The mourning was a long and painful process. Della, so young, sometimes asked when Mom would come visit us. Other times she would wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling for her. I felt divided between the pain of loss and the responsibility of trying to be strong for my little sister. Grandma was our anchor during that period. With infinite patience, she took care of our physical and emotional wounds. She enrolled us in the local school, bought new clothes, taught us to cook simple dishes. At night, she would tell us stories about Mom when she was little. How studious she was, how she liked to sing, how she dreamed of being a teacher someday. "Your mother was a sweet girl before she met that man," she would say. What happened afterward? The fear, the submission, that wasn't really her. I want you to remember the Lenora who could have been, not the one that fear transformed. A month after our arrival, when we were already beginning to create a new routine, the doorbell rang in the middle of the afternoon. Grandma went to answer while I helped Della with her homework in the kitchen. We heard voices, and then Grandma called me. In the living room was Detective Johnson, accompanied by another police officer. Their faces were serious, but there was a different gleam in their eyes, something like satisfaction. "We arrested Jerome," he announced without preamble. "He was trying to cross the border into Indiana. It wasn't easy. He resisted, but he's imprisoned. And with the evidence we have, including your testimonies and the medical report about the abuse, he won't be getting out anytime soon." It was as if an immense weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Della, who had entered the room behind me, ran to my arms, hiding her face against my stomach. Grandma sat down, her legs suddenly weak. "Really? He can't find us anymore?" I asked, still not completely believing. "Never again," assured the detective. "And there's more. We found documents in his car that prove he was planning to sell Della to a man in Millbrook. Fake documents already prepared everything. With this, his sentence will be even longer." In the months that followed, we had to testify several times, participate in hearings, face the gaze of strangers who knew our story. It was difficult, painful, but necessary. At each step of the judicial process, I remembered the words of Mrs. Daisy back at the boarding house in Smithville. Find a safe place, and when you grow up, help other girls who need it. That's what I was doing, helping other girls by ensuring that a monster like Dad stayed away from them. The final trial happened almost a year after our escape. Jerome was sentenced to 30 years in prison without the right to parole. When the judge read the sentence, I looked at that man I once called father, handcuffed, aged, his eyes still hard and cold. I didn't feel anger nor hatred, not even satisfaction. I felt only a profound relief, as if a dark chapter of a book was finally being closed. Leaving the courthouse, with Della holding my hand on one side and Grandma on the other, I looked at the blue sky of Louisville. The future, which before seemed just an empty word, was now a real promise. Della could grow up in safety, go to school, have friends, be a normal child. I could dream of being a nurse one day, as I always wanted, and Grandma could finally have the family she lost when Mom left. Shall we go home? Grandma asked, squeezing my hand. Home, what a beautiful word, what a precious concept. Yes, Grandma, let's go home. And so, my dears, time passed, wounds healed, and life followed its course. Today, at 73 years old, I look out the window of my little house in Pine Creek. Yes, I returned to my hometown about 15 years ago, and I thank God for each day of peace we've conquered. After all we went through, I managed to study and become a nurse in Louisville, fulfilling that old dream of caring for others. Grandma Annette raised us with so much love that gradually we learned to trust again, to smile without fear, to sleep without nightmares. She passed away to be with the Lord when I was 28, but she left in us her legacy of strength and kindness. Della also studied, became a teacher, married a gentleman named Alan, and now lives in Louisville with her 3 children, all grown up. She visits me every month, always bringing some treat from the city, usually those cream cookies she knows I love. When we hug, I still see in her the frightened little girl I swore to protect. Although today she's a strong and accomplished woman of 68. I never married. I dedicated my life to nursing and raising Della alongside Grandma. I worked for decades at the Louisville General Hospital, then in Pikeville, and finally returned to Pine Creek when I retired. I felt I needed to close this circle, make peace with my hometown. The town has changed a lot. It's grown, has more paved streets, more businesses. But the sky is still the same intense blue, the wind still carries the same smell of dry earth and flowering maples after the rain. And the people have the same welcoming look, the same simplicity I've always loved in this piece of Kentucky soil. My routine today is peaceful. I wake up early, make my coffee fresh, strong the way I like it. I tend to my medicinal herb garden where I grow a little of everything. Basil, rosemary, mint, lemon balm. 3 times a week I still go to the clinic nearby as a volunteer. I teach young mothers how to care for their babies, help the elderly understand how to take their medications correctly, check blood pressure, dress simple wounds. It's a joy to be able to use the knowledge I acquired to help my community. Each time a child leaves the clinic smiling, each time an elderly person squeezes my hand in gratitude, I feel I'm honoring Mom's memory, who in the end found the courage to protect us, even at the cost of her own life. In the afternoons, I usually sit on my porch to crochet. I'm always making blankets and booties for the newborns at the clinic. Neighbors pass by, greet me, sometimes stop for a chat. Mrs. Clarice, who lives in the house next door, always brings me a piece of cake when she bakes. Mr. Joseph, from the corner grocery store, sets aside the nicest fruits for me because he knows I like to make smoothies in the morning. On cooler nights, I go to the central square where the church bazaars and community festivals take place. I don't dance like I used to. My knees don't allow it anymore, but I love seeing young people having fun, children running around, couples holding hands. There's a life pulsing there that fills me with hope. On weekends I receive visits from my grandnephews and nieces, children of Della's children. There are 3 fine young men and 2 young ladies, all already established in life. They bring the little ones, my great-grandnephews and nieces, who fill the house with noise and joy. I make cornbread. Grandma Annette's recipe and apple cider. We all sit on the porch and I tell stories of old Kentucky, of local legends, of the 4th of July celebrations that were so different from today's. What moves me most is seeing that we managed to break the cycle. Della raised her children with love and security without the traumas we carried. Her children, in turn, are raising theirs the same way. The evil we lived through wasn't perpetuated. And that to me is the greatest victory. Sometimes when I'm alone and the silence of night falls over Pine Creek, I think about everything we went through. The 13-year-old girl I was carrying a responsibility too big for her slender shoulders. The long journey through the dusty Kentucky roads, the good people who crossed our path. The Collins sisters Anthony, Mr. Gerald, Nurse Julian, Detective Johnson, and so many others whose names time has taken, but whose kindnesses remain engraved in my soul. And I think also that life, no matter how hard it may be, always offers us a chance to start over. There's always a road to follow, always a hand extended, always a sunrise after the darkest night. That's what I want to leave as a legacy for those who hear me. The certainty that wounds heal, that it's possible to build beauty even after so much horror. That love, this love that made me protect Della, that made Mom help us escape, that made Grandma welcome us, is stronger than any darkness. My dears who have listened to me this far, when I look back and see the path I've traveled, I realize that all the stones I encountered ended up building the road that brought me to you today. As a nurse, I learned that the deepest wounds are precisely those that can't be seen. Those that are kept in the soul, hidden from the world's eyes. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start each day anew. When my hands tremble today while dressing a wound, I remember that 13-year-old girl who had the courage to take her little sister by the hand and leap into the unknown. We are much stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of overcome pain. And when I see in patients' eyes that same fear that I knew so well, I know exactly how to welcome them, how to make them feel safe. Because life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never completely goes out. If you're going through difficult times, if you feel there's no way out, believe me when I say there's always a path. Seek help. Tell your story. Anywhere in the world, there are people willing to extend a hand, just as the Collins sisters did for me and Della so many years ago. Dignity and respect are values that transcend borders and cultures. I discovered that we're stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take any more. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. That's why even at 73, I still have strength to help at the clinic, to welcome those who need it, to share what I've learned. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I chose healing not just for myself but for everyone I can reach with my nurse's hands. I chose to transform pain into compassion, fear into courage, trauma into wisdom. And you, my dear viewer who's watching me now, tell me, what pain can you transform into strength today? What wound can become a scar of victory? Think about this and tell me in the comments. I really want to read your stories of overcoming, your turning points, your new beginnings. If my story touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because we still have much to talk about. Each subscription tells me I'm not speaking alone, that my experiences can help someone find their own path. And that, my dears, for a 73-year-old lady who has seen so much suffering, is the greatest gift I can receive. Also, leave in the comments where you're watching from so I can get to know you better. I love hearing from all corners of America. We all do this every day, don't we? We rise from the ashes of what we were a little stronger, a little wiser. Remember, your story of resilience might be the light that guides someone through their storm. Until our next meeting, may God bless and keep each one of you.